Turning to poetry, embracing life. In a recent sermon, Barry talked about human consciousness and how we must trust direct experience. We seek through a series of initiations to transform ourselves again and again, and we recognize that we experience not one redemption, but repeated ones in the form of little deaths and rebirths, some not so little. In a series of workshops with poet Ellen Bass, I've had an opportunity to put aside stress and at times even despair, not having written anything to speak of for almost 4 years. The experience has been one of renewal, inspiration, and a reason to believe again in that awful, beautiful process of creating something that was not there before. In the next few moments, I hope to share with you some things I've learned that have helped me to go to the page again, and that may help anyone listening to link your own direct experience to something you write, or the next time you reach for a poem to help hold you up in a moment of loss, despair, or sorrow, or lift you even higher in a moment of joy. Each of Ellen's workshop sessions were thematic. Some of them were like an hour and a half long. And this was back in August, I believe, the first part of August. They included workshops on what is metaphor, detail and description, how to create tension, controlled chaos, syntax, and discovery. I want to concentrate in this talk on just two different and valuable examples of what I learned. One has to do with a phrase I've often heard in other workshops. The poem is not about you. The second example, how important it is to include complicity in a poem. So, how does one include direct experience and the poem not be about the writer? There's no other way but direct experience. You can only know what you yourself know and experience. No one, not even Ellen in this workshop, ever explained that idea. But it becomes evident when you work long enough and hard enough that you begin to understand how complex this process of making meaning is, how to keep ego out of the framework, how to discover some things about yourself, and how to rely on that inner voice when it comes to you. The idea amounts to this fact: the poem has a life of its own. That's really hard to understand. It has been for me for years, but I think I finally got it. You may often hear poets say, no, that poem isn't biographical, and then refer to the voice in the poem as the speaker of the poem. The poem is an intersection with direct experience, memory, feeling, ego, and the psyche. In the process, you may feel so strongly about a certain line or word or idea, but you feel pulled in another direction. You may feel you have said everything you want to say, but on return, even after several drafts, the past catches up with you and you wonder how you ever wrote that. There's a reason for that. You're not the same person. You're not the same person years or even minutes after you write something lasting. Have you ever found something you wrote a few months ago or a few years ago and you wonder how you ever wrote that? It's like reading something a stranger wrote. The ancient philosopher Heraclitus said that you cannot step in the same river twice. Think about it. So, what is direct experience? A piece in Scientific American puts it this way: experience is everything you experience. It's the tune stuck in your head, it's the sweetness of chocolate mousse, the throbbing pain of a toothache, the fierce love for your child, and the bitter knowledge that eventually all feelings will end. In a dialogue between Ellen Bass and Marie Howe, the two poets talk about what poetry does. not what poets make it do. Ellen says, one thing poetry does is to help us to see our personal experience as part of the human experience. We can't avoid suffering, but we don't have to be completely alone in it. Marie Howe says, this makes her think of Robert Frost's famous comment, poetry is a momentary stay against confusion. Marie continues, not only has someone stood where we've stood, they've somehow created a structure that can hold order and disorder in equipoise. The poems that we turn to over and over again are deeply felt and well made. When you pick them up, they don't rattle. With these kinds of poems, you usually don't feel the personality of the poet taking over. End quote. So she says that once it's finished, the poem can live on and on without being paraphrased. It stays hard and solid, like something you can really hold and carry with you. The poem can live on, quote, without being paraphrased, end quote. Marie talks about these kinds of poems, meaning the ones that bear quoting the exact words, not some descriptive paraphrase. Ellen recites a Langston Hughes poem she loves and carries in her head. Here's the poem, Island. Wave of sorrow, do not drown me now. I see the island still ahead somehow. I see the island and its sands are fair. Wave of sorrow, take me there. Ellen comments, sometimes I ask myself, how am I going to get to the island? Well, it's the wave of sorrow. The poem is telling me that the wave of sorrow is a wave of sorrow, but it's also going to get me to the island. It's a wonderful paradox that this thing that I don't want so badly is going to be a part of my deliverance, end quote. So we have direct experience transformed into, that is, reformed into something that touches a chord in us so deeply that we may memorize it or carry it around scribbled on a scrap of paper. I hope I haven't simplified poem making. It's hard, dirty work, not something you can apply to direct experience with a couple of workshop strategies and make something people will want to memorize for the ages. But that is what poets let themselves in for. And for me, it helps me to make sense of myself through discovery and to know I'm not alone. The poem is not about you, but it may be about everything. The second thing I want to talk about is complicity in a poem. This keeps the poem honest and lets the poem be the poem and not something else. Here's the essence of the idea. Chekhov criticizes a character in the Old Testament, one of Noah's sons. The son sees his father as drunk and passed out. I remember this so well when I was going to Protestant churches and studying the Bible, and it seemed like the point of that parable was about the son covering his father, which was an excellent act to keep any derision away from him. But Chekhov has a different way of looking at this. My notes from the workshop expand on this idea. There's a quote that says, quote, always remember the loneliness of the monster and the cunning of the innocent. I love that. Ellen says, suppose someone has done you wrong. Look for your own complicity. No one is 100% pure, nor 100% bad or evil. One of the new poems I'm working on was a direct experience so tense it's burned into my brain. I hadn't thought about it in years, many, many years, over 30 or 40 years. That's how far back this goes. This is, what did I do with it? This is the original draft. Okay. Another Friday night. After my first confrontation on a Friday night with his truth, sealed at the workplace, dark, locked, empty, like a drained glass half raised, I returned home through the kitchen door, the delicate pieces of marriage crunching beneath my feet, the shelves for wedding crystal empty. My two little girls appeared in the hall doorway, nightgowns, barefoot, crying, hugging each other. Stop where you are. There's glass everywhere. I tried to reassure them, sent them to bed, heard my voice try to say the right things, the sounds they must have heard ringing in my head. I am not reassured. He came down the hallway holding a suitcase like a new life, and I half braced for it to become a weapon. Where is my son? He asked. I can't find him. Our son opened the door of his hiding place and bolted to his room without a word. His father left through the kitchen door. That's the original draft. There are many drafts. So the new ending with complicity, or at least the loneliness of the monster, the cunning of the innocent. Our son opened the hall closet door and bolted to his room without a word. His father left through the kitchen door, packed with his own agony. So the line that goes, I am not reassured, goes to present tense. Reliving this piece of history from my first marriage was so intense in writing and crafting this poem. I was in present tense. I haven't decided what I will do with that yet. There's one more thing about this poem. Ellen talks about being a stopping point or wondering where to go next. And she says to think about what else you would like to invite to the poem, into the poem. I thought about the destroyed crystal, and it made me think about Kristallnacht, the night in Austria when Hitler's brown shirts broke windows of Jewish businesses and beat the owners. That icon came to mind, that image, and it seems like my personal Kristallnacht, but I really have to think about it some more. So I'm inviting you into opening that book of poems you have around the house, or look for a new one or two. There's a great deal of poetry online too. There's a poem a day that could be sent to your email. It just appears. And so you get to read a poem every day. Think of a poem you have loved or puzzled over and Google it. Look into the American Academy of Poets for some outstanding poems. I wish you good reading and maybe good journaling. And I have to put a plug in here for Alan Bass, B-A-S-S is her name. And her latest book is Indigo. She's written several other books, but she's a marvelous poet. Thank you.